Video game sequels can provide developers with opportunities to make refinements to gameplay, expand on existing worlds, or take a series in a new direction entirely. Some iterate on the original formula defined by their predecessors, while others introduce fresh mechanics, new stories, or even change genres altogether. With so many different routes they can go down and roles they can play, one question remains: what makes a good sequel? How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to the Loading Zone, where today we are going to be talking about video game sequels. And today I am joined by a very special guest. I'd like to give a warm welcome to the one and only Smash Max.
Hello, that's me. I make the video on the internet, that's what I do. I'm very happy to be here to talk about some video game sequels today. There are some gems out there that I want to talk about, and I'm excited.
Let's get right into it in that case. So what do you think goes into making a good sequel? Or a great sequel, in fact?
The age-old question. Yeah, so I was just thinking about this because I figured this would be the first question you asked because you're a smart person, and that seems like a good place to start. I feel like a lot of people feel that a sequel has to innovate on what came before it in some way, and while I do think that's preferred, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I think to some extent, if you do more of what you did before and you do it well, I mean, I'm not gonna complain, you know, like, look at Galaxy to Galaxy 2. This wasn't really the first example I wanted to use, because I wanted to use this as an example for other things, but it's the first thing that came to mind. So, like Galaxy 2 isn't, like, drastically different than Galaxy 1.
Right.
It does add several new mechanics, mostly Yoshi. Yeah, Yoshi's the big thing.
A couple of new power-ups, that type of thing.
Yeah, but overall, it's just kind of more of the same thing, and nobody really complains about that. I mean, people are like, yeah, it's a good sequel, and obviously there are very heated debates about which one's better, but I like sequels that really innovate on what the previous game was and really just like take that formula and do new and interesting things with it and really shake it up. But, you know, the bottom line is the sequel probably shouldn't be worse.
Right.
No matter what. Yeah, like, that's not what I want.
I would say, yeah, that's probably like the traditional, most typical way that developers tend to approach sequels. As you said, just taking what made the first game great and adding more to it. I guess with Nintendo, you've got their big, heavy-hitting multiplayer games.
Right.
You know, Smash, Mario Kart, Splatoon. We see those on almost every console, Splatoon more recently than the other two.
Yeah.
But each new entry is very much similar to the previous one, but adds new gameplay mechanics, more polish, etc.
Right.
And I think that's definitely a valid way to make a sequel.
For sure. Now, there are some sequels that are, like, completely out of left field. Like, I don't know what a good example would be. Probably, I mean, nuts and bolts, but
Star Fox Adventures.
Star Fox Adventures, yeah, that's good. But, you know, that also isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's very good to experiment with your IPs and see what interesting things you can do with them. But you also got to make sure that you preferably hold the same audience. So, like, I imagine a lot of people who played Star Fox 64 probably were very confused when they sat down to play Star Fox Adventures. Dinosaur played it. But, you know, I think it's good to experiment and kind of just open those boundaries and try different types of games. Because, like, there's a lot of series that do that, where, like, the series kind of has a formula set up already, but then a new game comes along and it's like, it's not just like some of the elements are different. It's like the entire DNA of this game is totally different. And Star Fox Adventures is a pretty good example of that. And especially if it's a series that's been going on for a while, that can be, like, really refreshing. And something that maybe the series needs, you know, maybe that's what the series needs. I don't know.
Yeah, can definitely be like a breath of fresh air, but you got to be careful, as you said. You got to make sure you don't alienate the previous fans.
Yeah.
I think there are other ways sequels can deviate without kind of completely shifting the genre as well. Because some sequels, they use the same genre.
Yeah.
They'll still be like a platformer or an action-adventure game, like their previous entries, but they'll kind of retool their mechanics to make the game feel different. It's like a different gameplay style or gameplay loop.
Right.
The example that sticks out for me is like Ocarina to Majora.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because those are two games built on the same engine, same character model, same general structure of beating dungeons, fighting enemies, solving puzzles, but the way the games work is very different because of Majora's Mask's 3-day cycle mechanic.
That's a great example, because if you play one of them, there's a decent probability that you're going to enjoy both. I mean, there are some people that really don't like Majora's Mask. Then you got other people who love it and it's their favorite Zelda game. And I personally have not played it, although I'd really like to, but the 3-day cycle, I know it's not that big of a deal, but it's always scared me. Like as a kid, I was always like, I don't want to play this. This is scary. But like, even beyond that, the overall vibe of that game is it's creepy. It's very ominous, and I like that a lot just as an onlooker because, you know, this game was made with limitations. This game was made, like you said, they used the same models, they used the same, all the same assets and stuff, but they managed to twist them in such a way that, like, these things that you're familiar with, that you know from Ocarina of Time, it's creepy now that they managed to do this. It's like, it makes the game so much scarier that it's all the same assets and that they're being used in this way to tell this story because it feels so familiar but also so different. And I think Majora's Mask is an incredible feat that they managed to do that, because like it was only like 2 years between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask.
Oh yeah, the turnaround was super quick.
The fact that they managed to do that quickly, I mean, they could have only done that having used Ocarina of Time as a base and using those same assets. But I think it's great that that's how it turned out, because it made for a really atmospherically amazing game, which is the only mark I can speak on because I haven't played it. I've seen people play it, but I've never played it myself. But just looking on, it has a vibe about it that no other Zelda game has. And it was a daring sequel. To go in that direction, you could definitely turn a lot of people off with that, and I know that it has, but, well, arguably not as much as Wind Waker did when it came out. But anyways, it's just the right amount of daring, doing something new, incorporating new elements, while still keeping the Zelda formula. And it makes for a really just strong sequel, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think as far as sequels go, it's probably one of the most impressive reuses of assets that we've ever seen. I mean, like you said, seeing all these characters again but playing completely different roles, it's uncanny in a way.
Miyamoto has compared Mario Galaxy 2 to Majora's Mask, and I don't have anything to say about that. I just think that's funny.
I do see the parallels.
There are parallels. I'm not so sure it's exactly the same caliber. Well, maybe I am. That ties into the video that I'm working on about Galaxy 2. That's why I didn't want to jump right out the gate with Galaxy 2, because like but I also don't, I'm not going to spoil my video either, but basically, Galaxy 2, I think people don't give it enough credit for the things it does right. Now everyone's like, the gameplay is great. Damn it, I'm going on a rant now.
No, go ahead.
The gameplay is like universally agreed. It's agreed to be like, you know, just as good, if not better, than the first game. People love the levels in that game. People love the gameplay. People love the new mechanics. It's all great. People love it. But people always seem to kind of look down on it from a sense of, again, the atmosphere of the game. Because, I mean, you can find jillions of video essays about Galaxy 1.
The loneliness, the atmosphere.
Yeah. Which, you know, it's true. It's there. It's worth talking about. I mean, Space Junk Galaxy in particular is a galaxy that comes to mind for me, where it's just like, you're just floating along in space and it's all empty and stuff. It's very cold and atmospheric, and it's great, and it emphasizes space and how it would feel to be in space very well. And that's also a very nice contrast with the epic moments in Mario Galaxy, because it's like the most epic Mario game that ever existed at that time. It's got the orchestral soundtrack, you know, Mario's like shooting out of a volcano. He's like, there's all kinds of stuff going on. It's a nice contrast.
It is very cinematic.
Basically, Galaxy 2, people kind of look down on it because it's not that the skies are blue, but I think there's a reason for it. And I think it's good that the games have that contrast and that they're not exactly the same, even though the game is more of the same. I think it's good that tonally it feels different. And I think, like Majora's Mask, that's a good thing to experiment with in a second game. And, you know, I don't know how much of this was intentional with Galaxy 2, how much of, like, the thematic elements were thought out. I feel like my video, I might come off as just, like, crazy Matt Pat, just reaching for straws that don't exist. But to me, it just feels bright and colorful and happy, and people look at that and they're like, oh, it's just your typical Mario game, you know? It's just, like, happy-go-lucky Mario, but I think it's good that this exists as a contrast to Galaxy 1.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, Galaxy 1 feels like you're along for the ride. Space is scary. Everything's cold and dark, and you're far away from the princess, and you're just kind of stuck. And, like, you're on the Comet Observatory, but you feel like an outsider, even still. You know, it's a nice little place. And, you know, Rosalina is Rosalina, and no one's going to complain about that. But it's a little chilling, honestly. And then you look in Galaxy 2, and you're in control. Like, you're the captain of the ship, and you're gonna go save the princess, and you're in control. And, like, space doesn't scare you. You're just going full steam ahead. And it helps that throughout the game. And this very much, I don't know what Nintendo intended with this. I might be reaching at straws here, but I really like how when you progress through the worlds in the game, you bring back some of the NPCs from those levels to your ship. And I've noticed that Lubba always kind of like trash talks him. He's like, oh, wait, why'd you bring this guy on here? I don't like this guy. He looks funny. But that's besides the point. You know, I like that you're bringing all these characters on because they're following you. It's like they see you as a leader, and it's like, oh, I can do anything because I have all these people on my side. I'm strong. I'm not alone. I have people supporting me who are pushing me to do what I do best. I'm gonna go save the princess. I like it a lot. And I think it's very good that Galaxy 2 is not Galaxy 1 because, again, just like Majora's Mask, a good sequel is a sequel that can retain the same gameplay formula while changing things up to still make the game feel fresh and new and exciting, even though you've already done this song and dance before. I think that's like the best way a sequel can be done. Because then there will be people who like this game more than the other one because of that. But no matter what, people are mostly still gonna like the game because it's more of what came before it.
Right.
Anyways, that's my gushing about Galaxy 2. That's all. I'm never gonna talk about this game again. That's it.
No, Galaxy 2, yeah, it's one I need to actually come back and finish because I've never actually beaten it. I've beaten Galaxy 1 twice, as in once as Mario, once as Luigi. But for one reason or another, Galaxy 2 is one I've never gotten around to finishing.
I beat it as a kid. But my playthrough now is the first time I've played it in probably 10 years. So, like, it's all just coming back. Because I knew I wanted to make a video about it, but I wanted to, like, play the game first to make sure I actually know what I'm talking about. And I do, luckily. But, you know, it's been very nice to replay it. And because, like, I've replayed Galaxy 1 because of 3D All-Stars. So, like, I've played it more recently. Galaxy 2, it wasn't on the 3D All-Stars for some reason, Nintendo, so...
I don't know why they left it out, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying, because I'm like, oh man, I can play Galaxy in HD, and I go play Galaxy 2 on the Wii, I'm like, oh, it looks like crap.
Yep.
But I'm not messing with Dolphin. I mean, I tried to get a controller set up on Dolphin that worked with the motion controls, and I'm like, this doesn't feel right, I don't like this, I'm just gonna have my footage look like it's from the Wii, that's fine, people like that, that's a vibe.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. And when I thought about Galaxy 2, I'm sure you would love to talk about Banjo-Tooie if those 18,000 views say anything.
Oh man, Banjo-Tooie, yeah, it's a game that I've talked about pretty extensively now.
Yeah, I'm joking. You don't have to.
I would gush about it because this would be the perfect podcast to talk about it, but I don't want to have too much overlap. It is, in my opinion, you know, an amazing sequel with this expanded, interconnected feeling world, similar to Majora's Mask in the sense that it has like a darker, more mature tone for the story. A lot of people don't necessarily like it because of the scale and the backtracking, but it's a game that holds a special place in my heart, and I think it always will.
Hell yeah. That's a similar thing to me as Majora's Mask, because, like, I played Banjo-Kazooie, I love Banjo-Kazooie, never played Banjo-Tooie, because the scale of it, I'm like a little scared. I'm like, I don't know if I want to jump into this right now.
It is a game that you need to properly sit down and dedicate some time to, so if you do get around to it, you gotta make sure you do at some point.
Yeah. I guess we'll talk about Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. Yeah. Those are very special games to me because those were the first Pokemon games that I ever played. So to me, like as a kid, I didn't really play it thinking like, oh, this is a sequel. It was just kind of a game that I played that I really liked. But now that I'm older and I look back on it and I played Black and White 1, it's very unique as far as Pokemon goes because Pokemon games don't get direct sequels. That's just not something they do. I mean, they did. I mean,
Gold and Silver, they continued on from Red and Blue, right?
Gold and Silver was a continuation of Red and Blue, but even then, it's definitely not as in your face as Black 2 and White 2 is.
Yeah, it's not like Game 1, Game 2. It's a bit different.
But Black 2 and White 2 is just very unique in that sense. And I think it's really cool that they did that because it makes the region feel more fleshed out than a lot of the other generations, I feel, because they had 2 games back to back where they could show off this region. And there was an actual passage of time where things changed between the games. And it feels like, even though it's only a course of 2 years, things are changing. And no other Pokemon game, I mean, Gold and Silver, that does do that with the Kanto region, but I mean, I'll be honest, Kanto's not really that interesting as a region. It's Gen 1, I respect it, I like it, but if you're comparing the regions, Kanto is not very interesting.
Yeah, agreed.
But, I don't know, I like it a lot, and it's just, there's so much content. That is like the best example of continuing what they did before and doing it right, because they took Black and White, and they knew that they wanted to tell a new story with it, a continuation of the old story, but it's also a story that works on its own. And they knew like they had another story they wanted to tell in this region, and they had so much more they could do with it. And you know, there's just so much more content because Black and White are great games on their own. Black 2 and White 2 add so much more content to the game. So like as a kid, I spent hundreds of hours in these games because I had both versions, and I know I played both of them a lot. And there's just so much stuff to do beyond the main story. There's like so much to do in the base game in Black and White alone, because there's like a dress-up show you can do, and there's like the battle subway. There's a few little miscellaneous things you can do, little side content things. But in the sequel, there's the Pokemon World Tournament, there's Pokestar Studios, there's so many new locations to explore in the post-game, there's so many legendaries to catch. The National Dex is there, so you can actually catch basically all the Pokemon, not just the ones from Gen 5, which was a big complaint when Black and White came out.
I remember it getting people a bit riled up, yeah.
There's so much to do. So like, even if you've played the first game, it doesn't feel like there's no reason to play the second game, because especially at the time, there would be a lot of people who would not be extremely interested in Black 2 and White 2 because, I mean, Black and White, when it first came out, there were a lot of people who didn't like it for one reason or another, and then Black 2 and White 2 came out on the DS during the 3DS's life cycle. Like, the 3DS was around. It was a year into its life cycle, so much so that one of the things that's side content in the game is Pokemon Dream Radar, which is something you download on your 3DS. So it could be a very difficult game to get into at the time for one reason or another, but looking back, it doesn't feel like it's like just, oh, I played Black and White, I don't need to play this. I'll be fine not playing this. It brings so much to the table that really expands the game's universe, that makes it gives you an incentive to play it. It feels like it has a reason for existing. It feels like there's a reason that this is the Pokemon game that got a sequel, and none of the other ones did. You know, there's something special here that they really wanted to make sure that they captured and did everything they could with.
It's definitely a rare instance in the Pokemon series, and you know, you look back at Ruby, Sapphire, they got the third version Emerald, which wasn't a sequel per se, just a more expanded version, which kind of made the other two obsolete. Same with Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. Whereas with Black 2 and White 2, there's a reason to go back to both, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, because I'm really glad that they didn't do like Pokemon Gray or something, because like they could have easily done that. And I'm also glad that they don't do that anymore, because now they're like, yeah, we can do DLC, so we're just going to do DLC instead, which is good. But I'm so glad that they decided to break the mold and try something different like this instead of just doing a third version again, because like you said, it makes the previous ones obsolete. So like, I have no reason to go back and play Diamond and Pearl when Platinum exists, like especially because Diamond and Pearl are honestly flawed in many ways, and they're things that are fixed in Platinum. So there's really no reason for me to go back. I don't even want to talk about Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. I think that's stupid that they split that into 2 games.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they did that. I played Sun and Moon, but I never bothered picking up Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon because I didn't get the point.
And that's fine. You're not missing out on much. I mean, it's so bizarre. But anyways, I'm glad that Black 2 and White 2 exist, and I think they're really strong sequels, and I wonder if they would ever do something like that again. I wonder if they would ever try to do a direct sequel like that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a tangent, but I do like what they're doing with the Legends series, like Legends Arceus.
Yeah.
Looking at the history of a region, going back in time. I think that adds like a lot of interesting lore and context to, well, from what we've had so far, Sinnoh, and hopefully in future Kalos.
Yeah, I'm excited for the new one coming out next year. Which I'm so glad it's coming out next year. I've never been so happy to hear that a Pokemon game is not coming out this year.
I know, yeah, they've been pumping them out way too quickly as of late, so it's nice that they're giving this one some time to breathe.
I agree.
As someone who played X and Y as my first Pokemon game, which is quite late for someone to jump into the series, I am very excited to see what they do.
For sure.
Another game that's kind of a continuation story-wise from the previous one is Pikmin 2 from the first Pikmin game. Have you ever played it?
I've... This is a story. I've not, because I'm currently working on a video where I play Hey Pikmin as my first Pikmin game. So,
I see.
No. I own Pikmin 1 on the GameCube. That's about as far as my experience goes. I'm listening though.
Okay, so if you're familiar with how Pikmin 1 works, you crash land on a planet, you have 30 days worth of air to keep yourself going, and you have to collect ship parts to escape. Pikmin 2, it uses the same engine, similar assets,
Right.
but it has a completely different feel to it because they removed that 30-day time limit. So it's a much more, I wouldn't say relaxed experience, because that game can be very stressful at times.
I've heard. Yeah.
But the lack of time limit means that you can spend more time just properly exploring or regrouping if you need to, and exploration is quite a big focus of that game. On top of that, they had a lot of new features. There were a couple of new Pikmin types added in, like purple Pikmin and white Pikmin.
Yeah.
And you had 2 captains as well.
Louis.
So in the first game you could only play as Olimar, and yeah, as you said, in the second game you got Louis now.
Louis. Yeah.
It adds some unique opportunities for multitasking, because in Pikmin, you kind of want to be making the best use of your time as possible.
Yeah.
In the first game, there was only so much you could do, but with 2 captains, you can effectively do double the work. You can have one character like progressing through the world, and the other character building up your army or staying at base.
Yeah.
And that's used also in a lot of creative ways for puzzles and boss fights. I just think while it's not necessarily always going to be people's favourite entry in the series, because it's not like a direct upgrade from Pikmin 1, it's more of a personal taste type of thing, I really enjoyed the new direction it went in.
For sure. I'm definitely interested in playing at some point. Pikmin 1, I've kind of put it off for a while because, again, I was like, oh man, 30 days. I don't know about that.
Right, it's kind of that Majora's Mask effect.
Yeah. I'd like to play it though. I played a tiny bit of Pikmin 1 because I had a friend one time who was like practically holding me at gunpoint and he was like, you're going to play Pikmin 1. I'm like, okay. But, you know, now I literally can't. Like, I have to hold off on it because I did 4 live streams where I played Hey Pikmin, and now I gotta make the video.
Yep.
So until the video's done, I can't play any other Pikmin game.
Gotta commit to it.
Which, might I say, Hey Pikmin, it's a great marketing tool for the other Pikmin games because I played it and I'm like, man, I really want to be playing actual Pikmin right now. Because there were things I liked about it. It's not like a great game. It's pretty mediocre, but like, there were aspects that I liked about it, and I'm like, man, if I'm enjoying this, then the actual Pikmin games must be great. So it was a very unique feeling to do that.
I mean, yeah, Hey Pikmin is kind of another one of those sequels that goes for a completely new direction.
This is true.
It's like a radical shift from the previous entries, and it's also one that's quite controversial and not exactly looked on positively by fans. It's not one that I've personally dabbled in, so yeah, it's interesting to hear your perspective as someone who's never experienced I was gonna say main series Pikmin game, but I think Hey Pikmin is also technically main series?
I don't know. But I feel like it doesn't get as much flack now because Pikmin 4 exists, and you know, a big reason that I assume people were upset at the time was because this wasn't Pikmin 4. We want Pikmin 4, and this is not Pikmin 4. But as a game, it's not as bad as people make it out to be. It's an okay game. Is it great? No. Would I have made it all the way to the end if I wasn't on a live stream with a friend? Probably not, but it's okay. I mean, it is a decent enough 2D platformer, and I think that the ways that they utilized the Pikmin in the game was actually pretty neat, and there were some neat puzzles to solve. And it was really interesting to see how well they actually managed to translate how Pikmin works to a 2D game. It's a really weird comparison, but it kind of felt like Yoshi's Island, like aiming the eggs and stuff, but it's Pikmin. But there were some parts of the game that surprised me, because if you've played Hey Pikmin and you made it to World 4, I think it is, that world is like really special. Like, it had an atmosphere that I did not expect the game to have, and it felt very different than the rest of the game in a good way. And it was, I'll have more to say about that in a future video, but I don't know, there's some good in there. And all the good that was in the game really made me want to play a real Pikmin game, because I'm like, man, this stuff came from somewhere. There's a source of all of this, and it's on my GameCube, and I gotta go play it one day.
Right, yeah.
It's a fun time.
You do have me intrigued now. I will have to play Hey Pikmin at some point.
You're probably gonna be disappointed, but I think I'm just easily amused.
I mean, in fairness, I am a big enjoyer of Star Fox Adventures, which I know isn't people's favorite necessarily.
I would not compare Hey Pikmin to Star Fox Adventures.
Yeah, I think Star Fox Adventures, if you look at it as a Zelda-like experience, rather than going into it with the expectation that it's going to be more of Star Fox 64, you're going to enjoy it. I mean, I can't say that for sure, but I definitely enjoyed it.
I do want to play it. I've been throwing it around in my head the past few days, actually playing it one of these days. I can't keep doing this. I can't just turn my channel into like, I played this game in the series first. It would also be a lie, because I did grow up playing Star Fox 64.
Yeah.
But I've been very interested in playing Star Fox Adventures, because it's a Rare game, and I'm like, I want to see what Rare did here. It looked like a game that's just so funky and bizarre and not Star Fox that it would be really enjoyable to me.
Oh yeah, 100%. And as you know with Rareware, they always push the hardware to its limits.
You know, on the topic of sequels, Rare does sequels well. We talked about Banjo-Tooie.
Yep.
The Donkey Kong Country games, it's just back-to-back bangers. I mean, there's nothing I can really say about that. It's just like, DKC 1 was good. DKC 2
was also good.
DKC 3 is more good. People don't look on that one as fondly, but it's good. It's good. They're all good.
It's a very consistent series, yeah.
Those are good sequels, because like, it doesn't even feel like they had to try that hard to do anything new. Like, they kept it going. They kept the same gameplay formula. They kept the same style. And they introduced so many new levels that were interesting and fun. And that's all it came down to. Like, the games do feel weirdly unique in their own ways, even though it's just more of the same.
Right.
Like, they all have their own little vibe about them. And it's just cool to see how much they did. Because, I mean, those games were pushing the hardware as is. So the fact that they did it 3 times and were able to, like, iterate on it so much, that's great. There's probably some other example of sequels that they've done.
DK64 is more controversial, if we're thinking of that as a sequel from DKC3.
It's a little different. It's weird. I don't really think of it as a sequel, but it kind of is. But,
Actually, there's one that I've got in mind that's not Rareware per se, it's more Rare adjacent.
Rare adjacent?
And that's Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair.
Oh, okay. That is actually a really interesting one to talk about, because
completely different from the first game.
First game's 3D, second game's 2D.
Yeah. Because Yooka-Laylee, it goes for more of a collectathon approach, whereas Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair is more of a Donkey Kong Country style of gameplay.
Yeah.
And I enjoy it a lot. I think I probably prefer it to the first game, despite the fact that I'm not usually like a massive 2D platformer kind of guy, because I really like the overworld, the puzzles that you solve in there, how there's like 2 different versions of each level.
Really?
Depending on what you do in the overworld.
Crazy.
Yeah. So there's certain characters or objects you can interact with. For example, there's like a machine that pours honey into a level, and you can either have that activated or deactivated. If you go into it while it's deactivated, everything is moving. I think it's like a factory type of level, if I recall correctly. Whereas when you pour all the honey in, everything get stuck. And it's interesting to experience two different versions of the same level that play completely differently. It's a bit of a tangent, but I do like it as a sequel for trying something completely new.
Yeah, and like the audience that it's trying to capture would probably enjoy both styles of game anyways, because like Yooka-Laylee is based on those old Rare games, and you know, Platonic is made up of people who used to work at Rare, and they know who their audience is, and you know, they know that people who like Banjo-Kazooie probably also like Donkey Kong Country, so who are they gonna lose? You know, they're like, people would definitely, I imagine, gravitate towards that game as well, and a lot of people might like it more because, like you said, I mean, Donkey Kong. Sorry, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No, I get your point. Yeah, it's capturing, you know, similar audience in both genres.
Yeah. And you know, some people prefer 3D, some people prefer 2D. So it is, in a way, it's nice that both of those exist because people probably have preferences, and both of those games exist. So if you want to play a 3D collectathon, then it's there. If you want to play a 2D platformer, then it's also there.
So a lot of people kind of felt that the first Yooka-Laylee game was a little bit half-baked.
Right.
Could have used a bit more time in the oven, whereas Yooka-Laylee 2 is seen by a lot of people as a more refined experience.
Sure.
Another sequel that I think did that really well, just expanded upon and fleshed out the first game, was Wii Sports Resort. Because the first Wii Sports game, while it was iconic, while it was massive, while so many people played it, it did feel a bit tech demo-y at times.
Sure.
Whereas Wii Sports Resort, completely different vibe. You know, you had Woohoo Island, like a whole setting for all of the sports.
I mean, it's iconic.
It is, yeah. You know, you had a bunch of new sports. There were like 9 different categories, but each of them had their own different events within them.
Right.
It was technically more impressive as well because he had Wii Motion Plus, which kind of let you do more precise movements. I remember distinctly with the sword play as well, you could kind of twist your wrist around and see the sword move.
And then they used that in Skyward Sword.
It's an interesting direction because I like the way it gives the sports a home.
It feels very Nintendo.
It
feels like a full Nintendo game because, you know, Wii Sports, like you said, it feels like a tech demo, which, to be fair, came free with your Wii. You know, you didn't play Wii Sports because you went and bought it because you were like, I want Wii Sports. Wii Sports came with your Wii and you played it, and for some people, that was enough, you know, like it captured the audience that it was supposed to. Everyone had fun with Wii Sports. Everyone was playing Wii Sports. And not that the overall casual audience can't enjoy Resort, but I think for a Nintendo fan, Wii Sports Resort is a way more refined version of the original game, and it scratches that Nintendo itch. And it, you know, you can play all the same games if you want to from Wii Sports, and you can play the new ones too. And you can just run around Woohoo Island and have fun. And it feels way more Nintendo. And it's something that the core Nintendo audience could probably get a lot more out of than the original game. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, no, it definitely has a lot of charm to it, purely because of how much personality Woohoo Island has.
I mean, yeah, people love Woohoo Island.
Yeah, and I liked the way, for a time at least, it was kind of a recurring location in various Nintendo games, like
Mario
Pilot
Kart.
Wings Resort, Mario Kart, Smash. Less so now.
Someone made that PC version of Woohoo Island.
Oh, they did, yeah, the Woohoo Island Explorer. That's a childhood dream fulfilled for me, because I loved the island flyover mode in Wii Sports Resort, where you could just fly around freely and see all these information points about the island. But I always wished you could just get out of your plane and walk around sometimes and free roam the island. And it's cool that someone's made that a reality now.
It's awesome. Yeah, I've truthfully, I did not grow up with Wii Sports Resort. I grew up with Wii Sports. Wii Sports Resort was not one that I did have. And I wish I did. I wish I could have grown up with it because the people who did play it have such a love for it and they love Woohoo Island so much. And I think Woohoo Island's cool. It doesn't mean as much to me as a lot of people.
Right.
But it's a really fun game. And honestly, it's just that game screams Wii. Like, I look at that game and I'm like, this is the Nintendo Wii. This is a game on the Wii. This is the game on the Wii.
It's like everything about that generation for Nintendo compacted into one little package.
Yeah, it's very awesome. There definitely are a lot of games like that where the first game comes along, kind of half-baked. Well, this is not a good example. But it works, because the reason it's half-baked is because it's an NES game. So it's not really, it's just what they were capable of at the time.
Yeah.
But I would like to talk about the jump from Metroid to Super Metroid because I forget Metroid 2 doesn't exist. There are some video game sequels out there that like more so in this kind of era, like the Super Nintendo era. But there's some sequels that almost it feels like a remake of the original game in a way, like almost a reimagining. But then they added so much on top of it because like in Super Metroid, you're on the same planet that you're on in Metroid 1, and you go to a lot of the same locations on this planet, I think all of the same locations, and you're like re-experiencing what you did in Metroid 1 all over again. And like the only three bosses in Metroid 1 are Ridley, Kraid, and Mother Brain, and you fight all of them again in Super Metroid, as well as a few other bosses, and they expanded the planet, and there's way more places to go that you need to go through. It just took what Metroid did, which was a very good game on the NES because of the level of exploration that it had, and that you had to use these power-ups to get to new places and progress through the planet. And it tackles exploration, and it's like what Zelda did on the NES in that sense, but like it's also different. It's 2D. It almost feels like you have less direction, because in Zelda, at least, you know you gotta go to dungeons, you gotta beat the bosses in the dungeons, so you know what you're looking for. Metroid, you're kind of just exploring until something happens, until you find something that you need. You never know what's going to happen, where you're gonna be. And Super Metroid just takes everything that Metroid 1 is, and it really perfects it and makes it what it was always meant to be, because now it's on the Super Nintendo and they can do so much more. And Super Metroid is actually one of my top 3 favorite games of all time because it's one of the most fun games to play, in my opinion. There's so much that you can do. It's so fun to explore and get all of the new items that you need to progress, and it's very fun to sequence break through the game and get things early that you're not supposed to, do things out of order. It is a dream of mine to one day be able to speedrun Super Metroid, because I know many speedrun strats that I can pull off, but I've got way more that I need to learn. And I've practiced a lot over the years, and one day I'd like to do it. But overall, it's just the movement is so much better than the original game. There's so many cool things you can do. You can shine sparks, so you can just fly all over the place and get to hard to reach areas, and you can do so many little techniques. I cannot imagine going back to play the first Metroid game after playing Super Metroid, because it just feels so bare bones in comparison. Because like I said, in a lot of ways, it just feels like a reimagining of the same game.
Right.
It feels like they took everything that it was and perfected it with the new technology, so it is more fun than it ever was on the NES, because the movement is so fluid. It's so fun to use your power-ups. It feels so satisfying to progress through the game. There's so many cool, interesting, atmospheric areas. Like, that is one of the most atmospheric video games I've ever played. And it's amazing that they could do that on the Super Nintendo. I mean, the Super Nintendo is one of my favorite consoles because 16-bit games are perfect. And 64 games, you get a little dodgy because, I mean, they're N64 games. They look like N64 games. A lot of them play like N64 games. But, and nowadays there are people who are making games that are trying to capture that style, which is cool. But at its core, 16-bit games are timeless, and they always look good. Like, they're never going to not look good.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a reason that people capture that style so often in indie games and stuff, because they look good. 8-bit games, you can tell it's an 8-bit game. 16-bit games, it looks so much more almost lifelike. I don't know if that's how I would describe it, but there's so much more life breathed into these games just because of the hardware that they're made on. So this pixel art can look so amazing, and that's great. So there's so many little things that go into Super Metroid that make it a great sequel. And while it basically did what Metroid did again, that's fine, because it iterated upon it so much and made it, like, if you liked Metroid 1, then you're going to get blown away by Super Metroid, and you're going to really enjoy it. And I'm glad they've kept up with the 2D Metroids. I'm glad that Mercury's team got to do Samus Returns and Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread is also a great game. I don't like it as much as Super Metroid, but it's a good game.
I mean, Metroid as a series is one I have comparatively little experience with compared to a lot of other Nintendo franchises. But yeah, from what you've said about Super Metroid, it definitely sounds like a really well executed sequel that kind of properly established the foundation going forward. Similarly on the Super Nintendo, I think A Link to the Past did a pretty fantastic job of that.
Yeah.
I think the previous two Zeldas, Zelda 1, Zelda 2, I've never really been able to get into them. Like, I've tried playing them, but I find that, well, A, they're difficult, they don't hold your hand, for sure.
Yeah.
But they feel a bit almost disconnected from how, I was going to say modern Zelda game, that's more Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, how a traditional Zelda game is played.
Yeah.
But going back to A Link to the Past, playing that for the first time, that still holds up, and I can still liken it to later games like Ocarina, A Link Between Worlds. It's got that classic Zelda feeling to it that I don't think the previous two games had.
Yeah. I get that for sure. You know, in many ways it is similar to what Super Metroid did, because, you know, it took the foundation of what Zelda 1 was and it turned it into more, like you said, more of what we could expect from today's Zelda games. And it's similar enough to Zelda 1, but there's a lot more differences there. But it feels like there's so much more life breathed into the game too, you know? It feels like this is what Zelda 1 was supposed to look like. But, you know, now it can fully be realized, and that's great. I need to play through A Link to the Past. I've played through the beginning so many times,
Yeah.
but I've never stuck through to the end.
Here's what we're gonna do. You gotta play A Link to the Past, I gotta play Super Metroid.
That's fair. We can do that.
But as far as other Zelda sequels go, jumping into a more modern period of time, what are your thoughts on Tears of the Kingdom and how it evolved from Breath of the Wild?
I knew we'd get here.
Yeah, it had to happen.
Tears of the Kingdom, in many ways, I see the jump from Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom as... I see it more like Galaxy 1 to Galaxy 2. Miyamoto, he's talking about Majora's Mask. Like, I get it. And obviously I had stuff to say about that. And to some extent, yes. But overall, in the sense of, like, as far as the gameplay goes, yeah. I mean, it is Breath of the Wild with more stuff.
Yep.
Same way that Galaxy 2 was Galaxy 1 with more stuff. And that's fine. I did not make it very far into Tears of the Kingdom. But I understand it was probably disappointing for a lot of people because, I mean, we spent so long waiting for that game to come out. And overall, it's Breath of the Wild again with more stuff. But the people who do care about the new content, the people who are interested in the new mechanics and building stuff and doing all that are gonna love it. You know, that's like, if you're a creative person and you're jumping into that game, there's not another Zelda game out there that gives you any kind of creative freedom like that to play the game how you want to play it.
Absolutely.
I mean, Breath of the Wild was like that to some extent because, I mean, there's so many different places you can go. There's different ways you could solve every problem. But not to the extent of Tears of the Kingdom, where you can just build whatever you want and go crazy with it. And, you know, now they kind of captured some of that in Echoes of Wisdom and kind of applied that sort of logic to a 2D Zelda game, which is cool.
Yeah.
But I think Tears of the Kingdom is, you know, I can't speak on the story or anything. I don't know anything about that. But purely from a gameplay perspective, I think part of me is not drawn to it as much as I was Breath of the Wild because it does feel like Breath of the Wild again. And, you know, it just feels a little like, man, we waited so long for this. But also, like, if you enjoy Breath of the Wild 1, then, you know, Tears of the Kingdom is worth a try because, like, I don't necessarily think it being similar to the last game is a bad thing because you can clue me in on how true this is. I assume they add a lot of things to the game that make it worth playing and differentiate it from Breath of the Wild.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of new stuff that's added in. I mean, I also have not finished Tears of the Kingdom, but I got a decent way through, and I'm still playing through it. It's kind of like an ongoing run I've got.
Yep.
But yeah, there were lots of things. The world was made a lot bigger because it was not only Hyrule, which is the same Hyrule that you see in Breath of the Wild, but you also had the whole underground area, the depths, that's what it's called.
Yep.
And the Sky Islands too. So that's effectively 2 whole new planes to explore. And then on top of that, there were so many new enemies and bosses because I found that there wasn't too much variety in Breath of the Wild when it came to that.
Right.
but Tears of the Kingdom did a much better job of introducing like a wider cast of bosses in particular was the main thing. It's not only just in the dungeons, but also in the overworld. There's quite a few new ones, returning ones that they added in. I'm a big fan of that, and like you said, all of the mechanics, the amount of creativity and freedom that you have, it's a lot of fun. Making a car in a Zelda game is an indescribable feeling, and it's something I messed around with quite a lot.
So, would you say that... No, this is the real test here. Would you say that this is a game that deserves to be its own game, and that it couldn't just be DLC for Breath of the Wild? Because I feel like it's the kind of thing where some people would look at Tears of the Kingdom and be like, this is just glorified DLC. And like they could have just added this stuff to Breath of the Wild. Do you think this game has enough of its own identity and does enough of its own things to deserve to stand on its own as its own game?
That is a very interesting point, and I can definitely see the argument and the reasons as to why people would feel that it could have just been DLC. It uses the same engine, reuses a lot of the same assets.
Because it was different back in the day, because DLC didn't exist. So, they had to make new games. Like, even Galaxy 2 could have been... Oh, I said I wasn't going to talk about it again. Galaxy 2 could have been, if it wasn't on the Wii, potentially, they could have just added more levels to Galaxy 1, but DLC was not really... It existed back then, but it wasn't really a widespread thing. Like, it did exist, because if you play the original Ace Attorney on the Wii, you have to install the 5th case as DLC, which is kind of stupid. Also, don't play it on the Wii. That's the worst way to play it.
Oh, no, I played it on... I played it on Switch, I think.
Good. That's a good way to play it. Some people don't like the hand-drawn art style as opposed to the DS graphics. Anyways, that's fine. Tell me about Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah. Do I think it could be DLC? I mean, I think it could be, but...
Would it be as good?
I do feel like... Yeah, I think it does enough differently. It has enough of its own story to be a separate game entirely.
How are the quests in the game? Like, obviously, the actual main story of the game, doing the dungeons and stuff, is that good? How is that compared to Breath of the Wild? And then also, doing side quests and stuff. Because one of the best things about Breath of the Wild that makes it such a good open world game is that there's always stuff to see and do. The world feels so alive. You're always running into someone out there or something, or there's always something to do.
Oh yeah.
Some sort of quest you can do, and that's why I don't like Scarlet and Violet as Pokemon games, because it's an open world. But why is it an open world? Because there's nothing to do out here. But that's besides the point. Do you feel like Tears of the Kingdom has enough going on in this world that is new and that's interesting and different than Breath of the Wild? Like, if you're exploring Hyrule, does it feel different? Does it have the same kind of wonder that you felt in Breath of the Wild when you're exploring and discovering new things?
I'd say that sense of wonder of playing Breath of the Wild for the first time completely blind is a very hard thing to replicate, and I don't think Tears of the Kingdom does that. But what it does do is also pretty stellar. It's similar in a sense to Breath of the Wild, in the sense that there's a lot of side quests to do, a lot of side objectives, and you will probably spend more time doing those than the actual main story. At least if you're me, I get very distracted with them. And it might just be because of how long a gap there was between me playing Breath of the Wild and me playing Tears of the Kingdom, but to me it didn't feel samey. It felt fresh. All of the side quests, they utilized the new mechanics of Tears of the Kingdom. You had ones where you had to go diving into caves looking for items, and the caves are something that weren't even in Breath of the Wild.
Right.
Again, I need to play more of it to be able to fully express the way I feel, but between the new quests and also the depths I found were quite a big time sink. Like, you can just go down there and spend so much time unlocking the different areas, lighting them up, just seeing what's down there, because there's a real sense of mystery that comes from the depths. It's kind of scary in a way, but I probably spent more time down there than actually in Hyrule.
Fair enough. I've heard about the depths. I've heard different opinions about them from different people.
Yeah, I know a lot of people aren't the biggest fans, but I personally am. Another thing I do like is the dungeons, because the ones in Breath of the Wild, I do think they felt kind of homogenous. They weren't too interesting thematically. Whereas the ones in Tears of the Kingdom, well, the style is similar because you have to go like around the dungeon activating X number of things to do a thing in the middle. They're very thematically different, and they have a sense of flair that makes them stick out. There's lead-ups to the dungeons beforehand. It definitely adds more context, adds more background to each dungeon, which I think makes them more memorable.
I see. It's very interesting. Because as an onlooker who hasn't played much of the game, I've played some, but not a lot. You know, looking on it, it's easy to see, like, it looks like Breath of the Wild again. Because it is. But, you know, like we discussed earlier with Majora's Mask, that doesn't really matter. Because, like, if you didn't know about Majora's Mask and you're just looking at it with the knowledge of Ocarina of Time, it's like, it's Ocarina of Time, but a little bit different. Tears of the Kingdom, you know, it's no different. If they're doing enough things to differentiate it, then there's no reason they shouldn't get a fair shake. Because it doesn't matter if they're using the same engine, they're using the same assets and stuff for the game. That doesn't make the game any less good. Like it was with Majora's Mask so many years ago. If they're able to do that and make it different and have it hold its own, that's great. Like in many ways, that feels almost more difficult than starting something from scratch, because you have to like
go out of your way to make sure it feels like its own experience that can stand on its own two legs.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it, yeah.
I mean, it's a different genre altogether, but I think another game that does that pretty well is Super Monkey Ball 2.
Oh, yeah, this is not where I expected to go.
It's that same arcade-style gameplay loop of tilting your monkey into the goal and trying to make sure you don't lose all your lives, but the stages are a lot more complex. They introduce new mechanics like switches that can speed up and slow down levels, or wormholes that teleport you around. So it's just the first game, but even zanier. And I like that a lot. And if you're not the type of person who liked the style of the original Monkey Ball, where you have to sit down and play it all in one go, Monkey Ball 2 does accommodate for that too, because it has a story mode, which lets you save at any time and come back to it. I would recommend diving into the original Monkey Ball games if you haven't already.
I plan on it. One of these days.
It's got a bit of a tumultuous history, but the first two games, immaculate.
It's on the list. Games, and like there's so many games I could talk about, but it's a lot of them is just gonna devolve into the same thing of like it did the first game again but better.
Yep.
Like I'm looking at, like I got Portal 2 back here. I mean, Portal 2 is Portal 2, Portal 1, but they did more and they made it better. Mario Strikers Charged. They took Strikers on the GameCube and added more flair to it, and it was better. Yeah. I don't know if this is as good of a talking point as I thought it was initially, but I was thinking about sequels to games that are like completely disconnected from the previous game story-wise. I don't even know if I have much to say about this, but there were a lot of games like that where like you look at Final Fantasy and they're all numbered games, but I mean most of them have nothing to do with each other and they are completely separate stories.
Right.
Same thing with Dragon Quest and
Fire Emblem.
Yeah, that doesn't really change anything about the gameplay. Like the gameplay is pretty similar across the games, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of sequels are sequels, and they kind of carry on a narrative thread in some way, and it's like a continuation of the previous game's story. But there's a lot of these RPGs that are just not like that. You know, it's just like all of these games are numbered entries. So you think, all right, I play this one, and then I play this one, and then I play this one. But it doesn't really matter because you can jump into any one of them, and like it's gonna be a completely original story.
Yeah, it's nice because it means you're not really missing out on any key context or key details if you just randomly jump into the most recent games. So I appreciate that about these mostly RPG series.
Yeah, it is refreshing in that way. But there's a lot of story-based games that are not like that, where it's like, hey, you gotta play all this. And I'm like, but I don't wanna. I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another one of the ways a sequel can deviate from the first game. Like we've talked about being in the same genre but having a different feel.
Yeah.
And we've also talked about the completely different genres, and now we've got games that are in the same genre but a different story. So it's interesting how you can either go down that traditional, that tried and tested route, or you can try something different.
For sure.
I think that's all we've got time for today on this installment of the Loading Zone podcast. So thank you guys very much for listening, and thank you to SmashMax for joining me today.
I did do that, I think. I kind of blacked out. I don't remember what happened. But I'm here.
Don't worry about it.
I talked about video game sequels.
We always do a section at the end of each podcast where you can go ahead and promote your own stuff. So why don't you tell the listeners about what it is that you do over on your own channel?
I talk about video game sequels. No, I make videos about games. I do reviews and retrospectives and video essays about various video games and adjacent topics with editing that's too heavy for my own good and it's gonna kill me one day. But personally, I would recommend that you watch my video about Sonic Colors on the DS, because as of right now, that's probably the best thing I've done. So that's a delightful little video about a game that nobody cares about. So
that's the best kind of video.
That is the best kind of video. You know, I've got a strange personal attachment to that game, and I wanted to talk about it, so I did. And I've got other videos cooking up eventually, but for now, that's all I got.
Well, there you have it. Be sure to check out SmashMax's channel. The link will be in the title, in the description, and you will be treated to some very passionately edited content.
That's what I do.
Alrighty guys, that is it for today. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.
Bye bye.